How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. I just want to acknowledge Gwen Culpepper, CDO at UNI, and UNI's role in spearheading this community-wide effort. And of course, we certainly want to thank the Community Collaborative, a collaborative replete with many men and women who bring a labor of love to this great effort. And tonight, we're joined by a slice of our business leadership here in the Cedar Valley. It's a lively bunch, and we want to go around now and give them an opportunity to introduce themselves, telling us a little bit about themselves, so you can have a better appreciation for who they are and how they're leading in their distinct capacities. We'll start with Ms. Carrie Dara.
Great, thank you. I'm Carrie Dara, CEO of Grow Cedar Valley, the local regional, actually, economic and community development organization representing the business community in the Cedar Valley. I have been a lifelong resident in the Cedar Valley, other than when I went away to school. So I'm really looking forward to tonight's conversation. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Stacey Bentley.
Hi, I'm Stacey Bentley, President and CEO of Community Bank and Trust, a local community bank here in town. I have been born and raised in Waterloo, and so been a resident here my whole life, and really looking forward to seeing how this conversation goes tonight, because there's lots and lots to discuss and talk about, and look forward that even more than tonight, that we can continue these conversations in our community going forward.
Exciting, wonderful. Terrence Hollingsworth.
Hello, I'm Terrence Hollingsworth, and I help companies access capital. We also help them become publicly traded companies. And I've always been introduced as a all-around nice guy. So I'm Terrence Hollingsworth, all-around nice guy.
You always have one on the panel, ladies and gentlemen. Always one on the panel. Mark Kittrell.
Hi there, Mark Kittrell. Let's see, been here a long time, 60 years. I think my family's been here for well over 100. One of the, I guess, group of people that graduated here in the 70s and then spent most of the 80s wandering around. Fortunate to come back and spent the last year basically in the tech field, the last 30 years in the tech field. I retired to real estate development, and that's not going that well, so we don't want to talk too much about that, but we're building a lot in downtown Cedar Falls, and happy to really support economic development and entrepreneurialism and everything about our community. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely, fabulous. And last but not least, Rich Kirkenbach.
Rich Kirkenbach, electrician, union electrician with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers here in Waterloo. During the early part of the 80s when I first started, our construction work here in the Waterloo area was very dismal. I finished my apprenticeship 2 years in Texas, both in Dallas and south of Houston. And then after I finished my apprenticeship as a journeyman, I traveled throughout the South, including everything from Montgomery, Alabama, Dothan, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and then in Birmingham. I spent 1.5 years in Birmingham. So part of that was really interesting, learning some of what we're going to be talking about tonight. Another part of it is my current role. I've been a union activist for the IBW here at Local 288 for 24.5 years, and also been the president of the Waterloo Building Trades Council. I'm a very big fan of economic development and also quality construction. We see a lot of problems with quality construction, and workforces being oppressed is one of the easiest ways to put it. And that's been one of my biggest battles, is trying to educate people on how to protect yourself, both as a public entity and as a personal interest in a business.
Wow, well, great. Well, we're certainly happy to have you tonight. And we want to kind of go ahead now and jump right into the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. You were assigned the opportunity to read a few chapters. I think it was class, space, gender, and sexuality. And I know class was really controversial for a lot of people, I think. And so we certainly want to go ahead and get started with the first question, though. And that first question is very simply, what served as an aha moment for you as you were reading through the material? And perhaps we'll go ahead and start with you again, Carrie, please.
Sure. So you just kind of identified the subjects of those 4 chapters. And I think the biggest aha for me, there's a lot of other things I know we're going to talk about, but the biggest aha was coming back that the author is a Black heterosexual man, and so that represents the race, gender, and sexuality, and he considered himself for much of his life to be a racist. And I would never have expected to hear that, especially from him. So that was the aha for me. So how, then you have to dig into the rest of the chapters to see, so how did he identify himself in those 4 classes as a racist? And so to me, that was just a real, you want to learn more.
Yeah, appreciate that. As a matter of fact, he went further. He said not only was he racist, but he was sexist and a homophobe.
Which kind of was all of those classes. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, so that was certainly a mark of humility. And
Mhm.
I think it makes him more readable when we know something about him
Right.
like that. Yeah, that's the way he said about himself. So he opened himself up for growth.
Mhm.
Stacy, did you have any reflections? What was an aha moment for you?
Well, the aha moment that I had to read the chapter several times was in the class one, and it was really about capitalism because me as a banker, I'm out. I've been trained and want to support capitalism. So to speak, how I thought I described capitalism, or how I used to think of it before reading this chapter a couple times, because it was giving people money and funds to start their own business. And that's how I felt was capitalism, and how I described it, and kind of proud to say, hey, I can help, anybody start a business and start, that lifestyle. But what I got out of this much more was and why he says anti-capitalist is not necessarily, it is that 1%, which I don't agree with, that piece of that, and he talks about that piece. But it was also, he was talking about when it was the anti-capitalist, and why to be that when it comes to racism. And I get that now, as I was reading through that. So that was probably my aha moment of, even as a banker, and thinking that I was supporting capitalism, not so much according to his definition, and it opened my eyes to that piece.
Okay. Yeah, I think he used the term anti-capitalist because so many capitalists don't like the sound of socialist.
Right.
So he said we will refer to them as anti-capitalists. And you said some interesting things there. We're going to have to come back to the banker at some point and nail down on that. Terrence Hollingsworth, what was an aha moment for you? You're mute, sir. You're mute. You need to unmute yourself.
Oh, okay, there we go.
There you go.
All right. I had a tough time really feeling like there was new information for me, because I've been living this as a professional for a really long time. And so you get into these areas and you're trying to raise money, or, for example, in my industry, there are $69 trillion that is managed by professional money managers. Only 1% of that is managed by Black money managers. And that road to get to equity is always, it feels the same. So more than anything else, I just understood his conversation and what he was saying about these things.
Oh, good, good, fabulous. Mark Cottrell, so what was an aha moment for you, sir?
Turn my mute off. Sorry, thank you, Terrence, for doing that. I would have been the guy that had to do that otherwise. So, space is my vocation these days. I've obviously been very involved in real estate and real estate development. It's really become a passion of mine to try and help our community and find a way to bring, honestly, kids and young people back, to retain people in the community that maybe are aging and, want to stay in their home, whatever those things are. So I think the notion of home and sort of neighborhoods and schools as a basic need that really struck a chord for me. And as I sort of really thought about, I guess, the whole story of 40 acres and a mule, I guess I knew, but, to have it essentially be taken away afterwards, which just seemed, it just grabbed my heart. And I thought, you know, I mean, this is a very long and entrenched problem that really needs to be brought in and really brought out and talked about. So I'm having a real experience here, and I think this is wonderful that you guys are doing that. So thank you. For communicating.
You know, Nicole Hannah-Jones, she's a native Waterlooian, but I'm gonna make sure that she connects with you, Mark, because it sounds like you're in favor of reparations. She'd be glad to know that. Okay.
Certainly helping with homes and schools. With the little part I can help with.
Okay. Rich, sir, aha moment for you?
It hit me in several different ways. In big part with chapter 12 with class. I mean, this is things that I fight for every day is in a role in my personal belief. So it's the aha moment was, it's not only things that I agree with, but I kind of knew, but it was seeing it in writing. Here's someone that actually took the things that I hear around me and put it in writing to a point where even a layperson can understand that. Now, like Terrence said, one of the things that I've seen and witnessed is the oppression of workers in this process of trying to help them with the unions and give them a better life. And it isn't a matter of class, it is a matter of gender, it's just a matter of being treated equally and equitably in a place of work. And I have seen it and I have witnessed the dark side. And quite frankly, one of the most racist people that I've ever met was a Black man I worked with down in Birmingham. And I had to give him some space. I was interested in just know him, meet him and who he is. And come to find out, he actually grew up, I guess, around the churches in Birmingham where the little girls got killed. So I understood he had a meaning for where he was coming from, but it took a while just to get to the point where I could even learn enough about him to understand where he was coming from. But when I'm reading through this, especially chapter 12, it hit me in another way. You know, in the political world, we hear those called liberals and conservatives. And my biggest aha moment was basically from the bottom of page 160 and all the way through 161 is all highlighted. I don't know how else you could put it as saying, these are things that I don't only just agree with, there are things that I believe in. And the whole thing about the anti-capitalist comment, as opposed to socialist or communist. It's kind of like when we talk about how ignorant people are when they talk about racist issues. When they talk about, oh, you're just a liberal. No, there's a lot more behind that. I don't consider myself just a liberal. I consider myself someone that's standing out for what I believe in and what I want to see this country, stand for. And that comes down to workers being treated equally and fairly. And
okay, well, let's stop there for a second. And let's move another question around, then we'll come back to you. You said something interesting, by the way. You met one of the most racist men in your life, and you said he was Black. Is that right?
Correct.
You know, just last week, we had a vibrant conversation where we had one of our panelists, an esteemed professor at UNI, that said Black people can't be racist. And I want to come back to you and just kind of get some sense to what you feel about that. But anyway, let's go back to Carrie right now, though. A lot has been said. So perhaps you can tell me something about what really disturbed you, what really unsettled you about some of Kendi's writing.
So it's exactly what Stacy started with. So for me, in my position, representing businesses all over the Cedar Valley, to have the thought put out, in fact, I brought it up to Mark last night. I said to Mark, because we both knew we were going to panel, I said, I don't know how I feel about this whole capitalism is racism kind of correlation. I just don't, I need to learn more. I need to understand this position of what capitalism and racism, woven together is how he describes it. So as far as disturbing, I mean, I think Stacy's right. You read farther and you understand that the definition of capitalism in this sense is probably not one that many people would agree with, but it's not, when I come from a philosophically professional position of supporting capitalism and making sure people have the resources they need to grow a business or start a business, and take them to their friendly Stacy at the bank. And then that was, for me, that was disturbing, because how do I knew this was a really important book. It's a really important topic. I agree that these conversations need to be held, but how do I work through that and represent what I do? So that's why I think these conversations are so critical.
Well, I appreciate your courage of being here for one. Yeah, he actually said that to love capitalism is to end up loving racism. Did that shake you a little?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And I'm assuming you love capitalism, Carrie?
Well, yeah. I mean, I represent, that's what I work to help people access what they need to be able to be a capitalist. Yeah.
You are such a good sport, Carrie. You're such a good sport.
I mean, well, if you are reading the book, which everybody here is, and all of the attendees, we've got 86 attendees is reading it, then you recognize when you dig deeper into the definition of capitalism, it does make sense. But again, what rattled me was working through that and digging deeper.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Stacy, same question. So did you want to kind of, further explicate your understanding of capitalism, racism, the twin of the two?
I'm gonna switch it up here a second, because he specifically talked in a couple of the chapters on banks and how unbanked Black people are, or any people of color. And so it got me thinking, and I've done, we all know about redlining and what happened in the day when there was redlining. And, the thing that, excuse me, that I think about is, banks in typical, gosh, there was loud thunder there. Banks in typical write checks, we give philanthropically, we have employee participation, so we pat ourselves on the back and think we're doing good in the community, which we are, but we avoid openly talking in these gaps or in these areas that we need to talk about. And that's kind of what's hit me on this piece of it, is so while we think that we're good corporate community citizens as banks, we haven't taken it further. And like redlining, while that's not affecting us today, or supposedly it's not. I mean, we're regulated about that, and supposedly we're supposed to be doing better, but you can't comfortably sit back knowing that happened, knowing that it's still talked about today. And what are we going to do about that? Because it's got to stop, and we've got to undo the social damage that happened in the past. And so how do we go forward with that piece, and I know we need to do better about openly talking about these issues and creating partnerships and listening like this and learning. And because he specifically said it, I'm kind of taking that to heart on, okay, so I do see where some of it's been superficial. And so how do we dig in and make that better? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And let's see if we can get another viewpoint. I'm going to go to Hollingsworth. Hollingsworth, let me begin by prefacing the fact that you were very instrumental in bringing Elizabeth Warren to the Cedar Valley. You hosted her at your home. And of course, Kendi mentions Elizabeth Warren in his writings, and it's on page 162. And, Warren makes no bones about it. Like many of the people on the panel, she loves capitalism, but she wants to define capitalism her way. And so she says that, she's talking about markets, market rules, competition, and benefits from winning. She wants to disentangle capitalism from theft and racism and sexism and imperialism. But Kendi goes on to say that, you can appreciate somebody who is willing to do that. But if you're successful at doing that, what you call capitalism is no longer capitalism. Or either what came before wasn't capitalism. And so, I don't know, did you have any reflections about that, since it was Elizabeth Warren that he used as a reference?
So it's interesting, because what is tough for me is I believe in, the thing that was most disturbing to me was the idea is capitalism is racism. Part of what I believe is that having access. We fought as a community, Black community, throughout time to have access, right? To ask for transparency, and so it's not that capitalism is racism. They're not the same. It's that we don't have access the same way. And so, um, speaking about Elizabeth Warren, one of the things that we were able to kind of talk through was the infrastructure bill, $1.5 trillion on the table right now. And we talked about it as being roads, bridges, high-speed internet, because of course Cedar Falls has the fastest internet in the country, and we didn't even know that at that time. But then 5 minutes away, Waterloo does not, and that hurts Waterloo as a community, especially uh, Black entrepreneurs that are tech entrepreneurs, to be able to do business. It costs more to go to Cedar Falls. It costs more to get in the retail space. And so what we are fighting for is to really get into these spaces, and when we go to banks, that they will lend money and help in the same way that they help to develop other parts of the city. So the commercial development is another part that we absolutely highlighted, because part of the new Green Deal is that commercial real estate um, has to be energy efficient. And if you're having a hard time accessing capital, then how do you not lose your properties? And how do you grow your businesses and things like that? And so the fight is for access to capital. The fight is for access to accelerated revenue opportunities. And so I struggle there, but I'm there. We're fighting and we're asking the questions, and more importantly, we are asking decision makers, when you go down to Washington, think about it this way, so that as these things come up, then you have a better perspective.
Access to capital. Mark Kittredge, did you have some thoughts about the same thing? Or, and of course, you don't have to stay in the subject of class. Maybe there was something in gender or sexuality that tickled your fancy.
Well, I'm a business guy and a tech guy, so you've sort of found the thing that I feel like I'm the most I'm aware of. That certainly the thing that I've worked the most on in my career. I would say the thing that disturbs me the most, or that I sort of worry about, is it's these days it just seems like everybody's fighting with everybody, and whether racism. I actually read this section on classism, and I thought at the end of it, I might be a classist. I hadn't really thought about that, but I may have that sort of set of blinders on. I've worked in state government for something like 20 years, and I'm a registered Democrat, but I work with Republicans and independents and everybody else. And I feel like if there's sort of anything that I think is important to getting our arms around this, is sort of just having conversations like this and bringing people in, and not sort of creating an identity that says, I'm white, male, gay, straight, whatever those things are. It's just, I think we got to just figure out, as Terrence just said, and I think Stacy and Carrie say also, if there are policies that we need to be breaking, especially in our community, down, let's figure out what those are, and let's go to work on those, because I don't know that we can change the world, but I have a pretty good feeling that we can change the Cedar Valley.
Right.
May I add to that?
Well, let's go to Rich first. Let me give him an opportunity, then I'll come back to you. Rich,
Okay.
Let me let you go ahead and get this out. And did you want to address the racism thing? You said the Black man was racist. I just want you to know, Rich, I just want you to know, Belinda Crane Smith would have a problem with what you just said.
And it's not just putting labels on people. It's getting to know them. And there's a lot of people don't even want to take the time to get to know someone. And in the situation I was at with this gentleman, I was interested. I was there. I was like a piece of clay trying to be molded with the environment I was around, because there was so much history. One of the electricians I was running with, he actually grew up in Shelby County, Alabama. And same age, so it was in the late 60s, early 70s. He was living down there with his parents. So just listen to some of his story and his take, and I would consider him probably more anti-racist than some of the, well, the individual I spoke about earlier. But it was interesting to see the things across the different parts of the United States I've been and I worked and integrating with other people. The part about capitalism, I wouldn't say I'm anti-capitalist. I believe in economic development. I want to see our union folks, craftspeople working on these jobs, getting better pay, for the knowledge that they have, the skill level and benefits that support our community. But the problem is we see so much oppression with workers, especially in the construction trades, 1099 or being paid cash, and contractors exploiting workers, and it doesn't give our craftspeople work opportunities with contractors here in our own community because of what's going on around us. And that's very frustrating in several aspects. It's not just frustrating our guys aren't working, they're getting work opportunities, but the people are being oppressed and being held down. And that's the part where this book really opens some talk points for me and talking to others and helping educate.
Yeah, Rich, I think that's a good point. And of course, I've said this before in different settings, but one of the unfinished pieces of work that Dr. King was engaged in was the Poor People's Campaign, where the major difference was economic inequality. And people like you see that very clearly when you're trying to ensure that all of the workers get union wages, but and this kind of thing. But I'm gonna go back to Hollingsworth. Hollingsworth, you had a thought, you had a reflection on something.
Well, I think Mark was saying something about kind of how he didn't see, just wanted to solve the problem by saying, we don't want to look at race, or we don't want to look at gender, we don't want to look at caste, right? But we have to look at it that way because the data tells us we have to look at it that way. Because at the time that Iowa had the lowest unemployment in the country, that was under 4%. In the Black community, it was 20%. And so for us to say that we can't look at it, we just want to solve the problem, it then it creates the problem. It double downs on the problem. And so I personally would like to see more companies willing to just look at their protocols and, making sure that what we do is make sure that we're not hiring, but interviewing Black candidates, because here in Waterloo, we are, 5 minutes from University of Northern Iowa. We're an hour and a half from University of Iowa, about 2 hours from Iowa State. And yet we have employers saying that they can't find Black employees. And those institutions are graduating students every month. Every semester.
Good points. Well, we only have about 2 minutes left, so this is going to be a lightning round. And Rich, I'm going to start with you this time in about 30 seconds or so. What is it that you want, the next book read that's just about to start to really think about as they get ready to plunge into the reading? And I need you to say it in about 30 seconds or so, and then each of you will be given the same charge.
There's a lot of reality here, and I guess that was my part that made me uncomfortable, is how much reality that I was reading that actually I've seen, witnessed as well. So I guess in the read as they're going forward, be prepared. I have people tell me that all this stuff doesn't happen around here. I'm telling you it does, and this book is pointing it out. It does happen. So.
It's a big endorsement, Rich. We're so glad that you're on this panel. Mark Cottrell, same question, sir.
And I guess I would just say, and I apologize if my earlier comments were taken out of context. I feel like what I was trying to say was, if there are specific policies that we can work on as a community, what I've learned about Iowans and I've learned about our community is we can come together and we absolutely can get things done if we make up our minds about things. We've done that with floods. We've done that with everything kind of in between. I do worry about voter suppression. I worry about drug testing. I worry about incarceration and the impact on employment. If there are those kind of policies, and those are just sort of ones that struck me as I was reading that I think we can work on together. I think let's figure out how to bring the business community together with local government and whoever else we need, and let's figure out how to work on those.
Yeah, we thought we understood you to have, you were conveying that sentiment the first time. So we appreciate you just reiterating it.
Okay.
Hollingsworth, 30 seconds, sir.
Well, I'll just say that more than anything else, I am willing to be at the table to talk about these things, and more importantly, offer real solutions. So I hope that we keep moving in the right direction there. And Mark, I understood what you were saying, but I think there's a lot of people that sit in that place and say, I don't see race. And the whole purpose of this is you have to recognize race. So.
Good point. Good point. Stacey Bentley.
I would say, let's not be complacent here. Let's listen, continue to listen to one another, learn from one another, and be at the table. And that's less than 30 seconds, but that's what it boils down to here.
Fabulous. Glad you're on the panel tonight, as all of you. And last but not least, CEO of Grow Cedar Valley, Carrie Darrow.
Thanks. So, this comes on the heels of our Economic Inclusion Summit last week, where we had hard conversations, and the title of the seminar or of the conference was "Let's Be Honest." And I think that we do need to be honest. I think this book is really providing a platform for people to be genuine and authentic and honest in a safe place. And so my hope, and I think an expectation of all of us, is that these conversations continue, but not just conversations for the sake of talking. Conversations, like Terrence said, with the need to find even small solutions, step by step. It's not going to be one big decision overnight that's going to make the huge difference. It's going to be, as Stacey said, we can't be complacent. And I think we've known for many, many, many years, if not generations, that there are things that should change when it comes to policies. So now's not the time to let up on the gas.
I could say one thing that happened last week that I wrote down was going from advocate to activism. And that's the key that hit me last week, going through that inclusion summit is that's the key.
Wow. Wow, that's impressive. That's impressive. Well, we certainly want to thank all of you. You represent our business leaders here in the Cedar Valley. And I guess I'll close with the wise words of Professor Ama Mazama. Perhaps you remember reading this. She said that if you can't be objective, just tell the truth. We hope that you all enjoy your reading tonight. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Nice.